One early morning, the silence of a quiet neighborhood was shattered by the smell of smoke and the sight of flames dancing against the dawn sky. What had once been a warm and bustling family home now stood as a shell of ash and despair. A single swing, scorched but intact, swayed back and forth, as if haunted by memories of laughter now lost to the fire. As fire crews dampened the last embers, the chaos only deepened. In the distance, a man, known to the community as Pastor Caleb Moore, was led away in handcuffs. His head hung low, but his face betrayed a storm of emotions: anger, disbelief, and a lingering hint of something harder to define. This was no ordinary crime scene, and Caleb Moore was no ordinary man. This was a pastor, a shepherd of souls, a man whose voice had inspired hundreds to walk a path of faith and righteousness. Yet today he was accused of an unspeakable act: setting his wife, Naomi, on fire. A crime that would shake not just his family, but the very foundation of his congregation. How does a man of God, known for his messages of love, forgiveness, and family values, find himself at the center of such a horrifying tragedy? This is the story of Caleb Moore, a pastor whose faith and life unraveled in the wake of a secret so devastating it pushed him beyond the limits of reason. What would drive a man who seemed to have everything, a devoted wife, 4 beautiful children, and a thriving ministry, to destroy it all in one horrific moment? To answer this, we must go back to where it all began. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe to our channel if you believe family should always be built on trust, love, and honesty. Before tragedy struck, Caleb and Naomi Moore were the epitome of a perfect family. To those who knew them, they were a symbol of stability, love, and faith. Their lives seemed almost too good to be true. Caleb Moore was a man with a mission. As the lead pastor of New Grace Fellowship, his sermons filled the church pews every Sunday. His words resonated deeply with his congregation, offering hope and guidance in a world often plagued by uncertainty. People described him as a man with a gift, someone who could take the most complicated struggles and turn them into stories of redemption. "Pastor Caleb was an inspiration," said one church member. "He made you feel seen, like he truly understood what you were going through. He was more than a pastor. He was a friend." Naomi, his wife, was no less admired. While Caleb took center stage at the pulpit, Naomi was the heart of the Moore household. Known for her kindness and generosity, she embodied the role of a pastor's wife with grace. Neighbors described her as a woman who always had time for others: a listening ear, a warm meal, a helping hand. Together, Caleb and Naomi were pillars of their community, but their most treasured roles were as parents. The Moore children, Leah, 10, Ethan, 8, Mia, 6, and baby Noah, just over a year old, were the light of their lives. Caleb often spoke of his family during sermons, sharing anecdotes about his children's innocence and joy. Naomi, in turn, was often seen doting on the kids, her pride evident in every interaction. To outsiders, the Moore family was the definition of perfection. They were the kind of family that others looked up to, envied even. They were always together, a neighbor recalled. It was rare to see one without the others. Caleb adored Naomi. You could see it in how he looked at her, like she was his everything. But even the strongest-looking structures can hide fractures beneath their surface. And the Moore family, as perfect as they appeared, was no exception. As Caleb's ministry grew, so did the pressures of maintaining the image of a flawless life. With every sermon, every public appearance, and every interaction, the weight of their public persona became heavier. Beneath the smiles, the family carried secrets that no one could have imagined. One Sunday morning, as Caleb delivered a sermon on the power of forgiveness, Naomi sat quietly in the front pew, her expression calm but distant. It was a moment no one thought much of at the time, but looking back, those who knew her now say they saw a woman who seemed burdened by something unspoken, something she carried alone. The cracks in the Moore family's seemingly perfect life weren't visible to most, but those closest to the family began to notice subtle changes. Caleb, once a man of unwavering certainty, grew quieter, more withdrawn. Naomi, who had always been the steady presence behind the scenes, seemed to avoid conversations about their children, a topic she had once spoken of with pride. As whispers of tension grew, so did the unanswered questions. What was troubling the Caleb What were they hiding behind closed doors? And how did it all lead to the horrific events that would soon unravel their lives? Before long, these questions would come to light in the most devastating way possible. The answers, when they came, would reveal a secret so shocking that it would shatter not only the Moore family, but the community they had worked so hard to build. Every family has its secrets, but some secrets are too heavy to bear, and for the Moore family, this one would prove deadly. As the years went by, Caleb's once unshakable trust in Naomi began to waver. It wasn't any one event that raised his suspicions, but a growing sense that something wasn't right. Naomi, who had always been open and relaxed, started to behave differently. Subtle at first, barely noticeable to others, but to Caleb, the changes were undeniable. It began with her interactions with their children. Naomi, who had always been a hands-on mother, now seemed unusually protective. Caleb often found her hovering over baby Noah, cradling him even when he was sound asleep. When Caleb would offer to take over, Naomi would politely decline, always with an excuse. "He needs me right now," or "he's just used to my touch." At first, Caleb chalked it up to maternal instinct. But it wasn't just baby Noah. Naomi's behavior toward their older children also changed. She became overly sensitive about their well-being, often cutting Caleb off mid-sentence when he mentioned their birth stories or family milestones. Conversations that once brought joy now felt strained, as though Naomi was walking a tightrope she couldn't risk falling from. One day, while preparing dinner, Caleb casually mentioned Leah's birth. The day he had excitedly rushed Naomi to the hospital, only to nearly faint himself in the delivery room. It was a story he had told countless times, always bringing laughter to their family gatherings. But this time, Naomi's reaction was different. She froze, her smile faltering, and quickly changed the subject. "How about we talk about the kids' upcoming school play instead?" she said, her tone light, but her eyes avoiding his. Moments like these began to pile up. Small instances that might seem insignificant on their own, but together painted a picture Caleb couldn't ignore. He started to notice how Naomi avoided discussions about the children's early years, and how she seemed uneasy whenever he brought up anything about their pregnancies. It was as if she was keeping something locked away, a part of their life she didn't want to revisit. The turning point came during a routine doctor's appointment for baby Noah. Caleb had accompanied Naomi to the clinic, sitting quietly in the waiting room as she took Noah in for a checkup. But as he waited, the door to the exam room was left slightly ajar, and Caleb overheard fragments of a conversation between Naomi and the doctor. "I just don't want any complications," Naomi said, her voice low but firm. The doctor responded, equally quiet, "I understand, but you need to be cautious about how you proceed." Caleb leaned closer, straining to hear more, but the door was quickly shut. When Naomi emerged, she was smiling, as though nothing unusual had happened. Caleb asked her what the conversation was about, and she dismissed it with a wave of her hand. "Oh, nothing serious," she said. "Just some standard advice for Noah's health." But Caleb wasn't convinced. The tone of their discussion didn't match the casual explanation Naomi offered. For the first time in their marriage, Caleb felt a gnawing doubt. What wasn't she telling him? One evening, months after the appointment, Caleb found himself searching through their bedroom closet. He was looking for an old family photo album to show the kids, who had been asking to see pictures from their younger years. As he moved boxes and sorted through old belongings, his hand brushed against a small, unmarked box tucked into the back corner of the closet. At first, Caleb thought nothing of it, but as he opened the box, his casual curiosity turned to confusion and then to dread. Inside were hospital records, adoption papers, and DNA test results. He scanned the documents, his eyes darting from one page to the next, his heart pounding with every word he read. The records revealed a shocking truth. The children were not biologically theirs. In fact, some of the adoption papers appeared to have been processed through questionable channels, raising even more alarming questions. Caleb's hands trembled as he pulled out a medical report bearing Naomi's name. The document detailed a traumatic incident from her teenage years, a car accident that had resulted in a complete hysterectomy. Naomi had lost her womb long before they had even met. The implications hit Caleb like a tidal wave. How could they have 4 children if Naomi had been unable to conceive? And why had she never told him? He sat there for what felt like hours, the weight of the discovery pressing down on him. Memories of their life together played in his mind. Their wedding vows, their plans to start a family, the joy they had shared with each child's birth. All of it now felt like a lie. Later that night, unable to contain his emotions, Caleb confronted Naomi. Holding the box in his hands, he demanded answers. "Naomi, what is this?" he asked, his voice breaking. "What are these documents? Why didn't you tell me?" Naomi's face went pale as she saw the box. Tears welled up in her eyes as she tried to explain. She confessed that, as a teenager, she had been in a car accident that left her unable to have children. When she met Caleb and learned of his dream to have a large family, she felt she couldn't bear to disappoint him. "You're a pastor," she said through sobs. "People look up to you, to us. What would they say if they knew I couldn't give you children?" Desperate to build the family Caleb had always wanted, Naomi revealed that she had secretly arranged adoptions, some through legal channels and others through less conventional means. She had gone to great lengths to ensure that Caleb believed the children were theirs, even falsifying documents and hiding the truth for years. Caleb was stunned. The woman he had loved and trusted had orchestrated a deception so intricate he could hardly believe it. He felt a storm of emotions: anger, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of loss. The life he thought he knew, the family he had cherished, now felt like a carefully constructed illusion. Naomi pleaded with him to understand. "I did it for us, Caleb. I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want you to feel ashamed." But her words did little to ease the pain Caleb felt. For him, it wasn't just the lie that hurt. It was the years of trust that had been shattered in an instant. As the night wore on, the argument grew heated. Caleb's world had been turned upside down, and Naomi's attempts to justify her actions only deepened the divide between them. By the time the conversation ended, the rift between them felt insurmountable. What had once been a partnership built on faith and love now seemed irreparably broken. Caleb's mind raced as he tried to process what he had learned. Questions swirled endlessly. How could she have kept this from him? What would the congregation think if they found out? And most importantly, what would this mean for their family moving forward? This revelation was only the beginning. The events that followed would push Caleb to the edge, leading to a night of unimaginable consequences. The days following the shocking revelation felt like a surreal nightmare for Caleb. The walls of his seemingly perfect life were crumbling around him, and no matter how hard he tried to keep it together, the weight of Naomi's betrayal bore down on him relentlessly. Caleb spent hours locked away in his study, staring blankly at family photos that once brought him joy. Now each smiling face seemed like a cruel reminder of the lies that had woven their way into his life. Naomi's words echoed in his mind, haunting him at every turn. "I did it for us. I didn't want to lose you." But Caleb couldn't reconcile those words with the magnitude of her deception. How could she have kept such a monumental truth from him for so long? Every time he tried to pray for clarity, his faith, which had always been his anchor, felt distant, fractured. Flashbacks painted a grim picture. Caleb pacing the living room late into the night, clutching a Bible that now felt heavier than ever. He began to question not just his marriage, but his own judgment. Had he been blind to signs of dishonesty all along? Was he so consumed with his role as a father and a pastor that he missed the cracks forming beneath the surface? Naomi, desperate to salvage what remained of their relationship, tried to explain her actions. She followed Caleb room to room, pleading for him to understand her perspective. "I didn't know what else to do, Caleb," she said one night, her voice breaking. "I couldn't bear the thought of disappointing you, of losing you. I only wanted to give you the family you always dreamed of." But her words, no matter how heartfelt, only deepened Caleb's turmoil. He spiraled into anger and paranoia, questioning the authenticity of every moment they had shared as a family, every milestone, every cherished memory. Were they all built on a lie? The situation took a darker turn when Caleb received a letter from social services. The letter was direct and devastating. Authorities were investigating the illegal adoption network Naomi had used. If her involvement was confirmed, their children could be taken into custody. Caleb's hands trembled as he read the letter over and over, each word cutting deeper than the last. The idea of losing the children, innocent souls who had nothing to do with the sins of their mother, was unbearable. But anger, fear, and confusion clouded his judgment. He wasn't sure what to believe anymore. The night of the fire would later be described by neighbors as a scene of chaos and horror, but for Caleb, it began as just another evening consumed by despair. He had retreated to the garage, seeking solitude in a space where the weight of Naomi's betrayal couldn't reach him. The garage was cluttered with tools, remnants of unfinished projects, and a gasoline canister he had used to fuel the lawnmower. Caleb sat on an old stool, staring at the floor, his mind racing. Thoughts of guilt, anger, and hopelessness collided in a storm that he couldn't silence. He felt like a man undone, his faith shaken, his marriage destroyed, and his identity as a father slipping through his fingers. Naomi, sensing the depth of his despair, came looking for him. She opened the door to the garage and found Caleb sitting in silence, his shoulders slumped. "Caleb," she said softly, stepping inside, "please, we can get through this. We just need to talk, really talk." But her presence only ignited the anger simmering beneath Caleb's grief. He stood abruptly, knocking over the stool, and turned to face her. "Talk? You want to talk now, Naomi? After everything you've done? Do you have any idea what you've put me through? What you've put this family through?" Naomi took a cautious step closer, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I know I've made mistakes, Caleb, but I was trying to protect us. Please, don't let this tear us apart." Her words fell on deaf ears. Caleb's emotions boiled over, and in a moment of reckless fury, he grabbed the gasoline canister. Naomi's eyes widened in alarm as he began pouring the liquid across the garage floor, muttering under his breath about cleansing the lies, the deceit, the pain. "Stop, Caleb, please!" Naomi cried, rushing toward him. She grabbed his arm, trying to wrest the canister from his grasp, but he shook her off. "Don't you see, Naomi?" he shouted. "This is what you've done to us. You've burned everything to the ground already. This is just the final act." Naomi's pleas grew more desperate as Caleb moved from the garage into the house, the trail of gasoline following him. The scent of fuel filled the air, mingling with the tension that hung thick between them. "Caleb, think about the kids. Think about your faith. This isn't you." But Caleb was beyond reason. His grief and anger had consumed him, leaving no room for logic or restraint. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a matchbook, and struck a match. "No!" Naomi screamed, lunging toward him. But it was too late. Caleb dropped the match, and in an instant the flames roared to life, engulfing the trail of gasoline and spreading rapidly through the house. Neighbors later recounted hearing Naomi's screams, followed by the crackling of flames and the sight of smoke billowing into the night sky. By the time the fire department arrived, it was too late. The house was reduced to ashes, and with it, the life Caleb and Naomi had built together. Caleb was found outside, his clothes singed and his face streaked with soot. He stared blankly at the inferno, his expression a mixture of shock and resignation. Naomi was nowhere to be found. The days following the fire brought a whirlwind of legal proceedings and community outrage. Caleb was arrested at the scene, charged with arson and the murder of his wife. The community, once united in their admiration for the Moore family, was now divided. Courtroom proceedings painted two starkly different pictures of Caleb. The defense argued that he had acted in a moment of emotional collapse, driven to the brink by Naomi's betrayal and the threat of losing his children. But the prosecution framed him as a man consumed by pride and anger, willing to destroy everything and everyone in his path. Interviews with neighbors and church members revealed a community grappling with shock and betrayal. How could someone like Caleb, a man of faith, a leader in our community, do something so terrible? One parishioner asked, tears streaming down her face. Another added, "We all looked up to him. He was the kind of man you'd trust with anything, and now we don't know what to believe." As the trial unfolded, the truth about Naomi's actions and the adoption network came to light, casting a dark shadow over the Moore family's legacy. But for Caleb, the fire had already consumed everything he held dear: his family, his faith, and his future. In the aftermath of the fire and the trial, the focus shifted to the Moore children, innocent victims caught in a storm of devastation. With both parents gone, one lost to the flames and the other to a prison sentence, their future was uncertain. After much deliberation, custody was awarded to Naomi's estranged sister, Lydia, a woman who had maintained a distant but cordial relationship with the family. Though Lydia was reluctant to step into the chaos, she knew the children needed stability and protection from the growing media frenzy. Reporters hounded Lydia's home, eager to capture any glimpse of the children or extract a statement about the tragedy that had engulfed their family. The constant barrage of attention forced her to make difficult decisions, including pulling the children out of school and relocating to a quieter town. For the children, the adjustment was anything but smooth. The oldest, who was old enough to grasp the enormity of what had happened, struggled with a mix of anger, confusion, and grief. The younger ones, though less aware of the details, felt the absence of their parents in ways that words could not capture. Meanwhile, Caleb, now serving a lengthy prison sentence, began writing letters to his children. Each letter was filled with remorse, a desperate attempt to explain his actions and plead for their forgiveness. In one of his letters, Caleb wrote, "I know, I can never undo the pain I've caused. Every day, I pray that one day you'll understand how much I love you, even though I failed you in the worst possible way. Please, don't let my mistakes define your lives." The children's guardian, Lydia, faced a difficult decision whether or not to share the letters with them. After weeks of internal debate, she chose to keep them for the future, fearing that the wounds were too fresh for the children to process their father's words. The story of Caleb Moore is a sobering reminder of how fragile the foundations of trust and family can be. What began as a seemingly idyllic life unraveled under the weight of hidden truths, fractured communication, and unprocessed emotions. In the years that followed, the community continued to contend with the tragedy, with some seeking solace in their faith and others questioning how such a revered figure could fall so far. If you found it impactful and thought-provoking, please consider subscribing to our channel for more real-life stories like this one. Don't miss out on future documentaries that dive into the complex and sometimes heartbreaking truths of everyday life. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. Your support means the world to us.